First thing I want to do is remove the wheel, 21mm socket, remove all 5 of your lug nuts. And remove the wheel. Now with the wheel off, I have clear access to this jam nut. 22mm wrench, I'm going to break it free. You can use a rubber mallet on the wrench, hold the wrench so it doesn't go flying. There we go, that broke free now. All we have to do is unlock it. That'll let go of the outer tie rod. Now I'm going to take the cotter pin off for the castle nut. And let's remove the castle nut. 19mm socket, remove the castle nut. Okay, use a hammer right here on the knuckle. That'll pop the tie rod free. Oh, there we go. Now remove this. When you remove the outer tie rod, count the amount of turns that it took to take it off. That way when you put it back on, you can put it on the same amount of turns and it'll get you as close as possible to a good alignment. You will still have to go to an alignment shop after, but this will get you close. Okay, I had 13.5 turns, so I'll remember that number. So I have locking pliers on the inner tie rod with a 22mm socket. I'm going to attempt to remove this nut. A lot of times it gets seized on here, so if yours is stuck and this doesn't take it off, some heat might help from a torch. Looks like I will need that. So this is not coming off. It's just stripping out my locking pliers, and I'm just going to cut the nut off. You can either cut the tie rod. I mean, hopefully this doesn't even happen to you at all and you don't have to resort to this, but if it does happen, getting the bellows boot off, the only way to get the boot off is to get this nut off. So I have to either cut the tie rod or cut the nut, remove it in one way or another. Now I'm going to turn it around so I can cut a little slice on the other side, and then hopefully I can just use a hammer and get this thing right off. Okay, I'm pretty sure that cut through on both sides. All right, I'm going to use an air hammer, but you can do this with a regular hammer or something else that you have that can punch this off. This is going to make things go faster. Okay, that's 1 and 2. Let's remove this clamp here with some needle nose pliers, and then I'm going to grab the boot, give it a little twist just to make sure it breaks free from the tie rod. This one is twisting separately. Okay, so on this car, the clamp is just a twisted piece of wire, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut it off. Now I can grab a pry bar and remove it the rest of the way. Perfect, throw that away. And now you can grab your boot, pull it, pop it off the rack, and if you keep following it, pull it off the tie rod. There we go. I'm going to fix this in a second. You want to inspect this, make sure it's not broken or torn. This one looks perfectly fine, so I'm good to reuse it. I'm going to go ahead and fix this piece. Now I'm going to get my inner tie rod tool on here. They make different types of inner tie rod removal tools, but this is just one type. It basically clamps onto this joint here, and once it's clamped on tight, you use a long 3/8 extension, and you just break it free by twisting it from there. So the key to this is to make sure that it's tight. That way it can grip onto the tie rod as you're twisting it, and it won't slip. Okay, now I have my long ratchet with an extension in there. Just going to try and break it free. Perfect. All right. Now I can remove my tie rod tool, and from here on out I can just do it by hand. Okay. we go. Here's your inner tie rod. So I took a rag and cleaned out this area and the inside of the threads just a little bit so that there's no grease or debris in there. I also applied some red thread locker on these threads to make sure that they lock in. Now I'm going to start the inner tie rod on. Sometimes this is a little challenging just because the threads are very fine threads, so because it wobbles easily, it's hard to start them. But now I'm just going to go ahead and bottom it out by hand. Then I'll use my tool, clamp it on, and make sure it's actually tight. Okay, that's as much as I can do it by hand. Now I'm going to clamp on this tool. This will help me make sure it's nice and tight. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and tighten it up. You don't want to tighten it too much because when you're twisting this, you risk twisting the whole rack inside, and that damages seals and internal components. So you just want to go snug, a little extra, and that's good right there. You do have thread locker on it. That's going to hold it on for you. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and remove my tool. Now your tie rod should have come with a little packet of grease, and I'm going to bend it or turn it to the side and add pretty much all of my grease in here. What this is going to do is it's going to help the that ball and socket joint last for a very long time. If you don't grease it, it's just spinning dry, so it will prematurely wear. Okay, work it in a little bit. As long as it's covering all the areas that it needs to, it's going to work itself in over time. Perfect. Before I put the boot on completely, this area right here is where the boot actually sits and clamps on, and I'm going to put whatever remaining grease I have on there. What that's going to do is it's going to prevent the rubber from actually getting stuck onto the tie rod, so that when you go for an alignment and the alignment professional twists the tie rod, it's not going to twist the whole boot off and potentially rip it. So slide this on, press it on all the way. That clamps on right here, and now we have to press it onto the steering rack. So line it up, and it should, yep, that just fell right over into place. Now let's grab some wire ties. I have the wire tie already started. I'm going to slide it all the way onto the boot to where it's supposed to clamp on to the steering rack. Once it's on there, I'm going to snug it up. I'm going to use these needle nose pliers just to grab onto the wire tie, twist it. That's going to help me tighten it up a little bit more. All right, and now I'm going to cut off the excess. Perfect. I'm reusing mine, but if yours is weak and it doesn't hold pressure anymore, if it doesn't squeeze the boot, then you can also use a wire tie for this end. I'm going to apply some anti-seize to these threads. This will not just help the jam nut not seize up, but also the outer tie rod. Slide this on. I'm just going to go most of the way on. That way the outer tie rod has enough threads to grab onto. Now go ahead and thread on your outer tie rod the same amount of turns that it took to take it off. So for me it was 13.5, but for you it's going to be different. Thirteen and a half gets me to the tie rod being upside down, so I'm just going to go 14. No matter what I do, it's still not going to be exactly the same as it was before. I'll still need an alignment, so from here on the alignment professional can take over. Remove this nut from the outer tie rod, and let's put it through the knuckle here. Press it through. Oops. Okay, reinstall the nut. Let's bottom it out and then torque it. 22 millimeter socket, let's snug it up. Now let's torque it to 41 foot-pounds. Okay, 41 foot-pounds. Right there, perfect. Now let's snug up the jam nut, 22 millimeter wrench. You don't have to go very tight on this, but tight enough to lock these two in. And I just like to straighten out the outer tie rod so that it's sitting perpendicular to the knuckle, not at an angle like this. All right. Now let's reinstall the wheel, and then you can go down to your local alignment shop and have this professionally aligned. Now let's get the wheel on. Start on all 5 of your lug nuts, snug them up, and then I'll torque them to 80 foot-pounds. All right.